Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into some seriously cool AI.
Absolutely.
All right, so today we're taking a look at, what are they called?
Artificial Kuramoto Oscillatory Neurons.
Yeah, those. AKOrNs. Catchy, right.
Definitely rolls off the tongue.
So I was reading this research paper and honestly, mind blown.
It's pretty wild stuff.
It is. So these AKOrNs, they're like neurons, but not.
Well, they are inspired by how neurons work in our brains, but with a twist. They incorporate this idea of oscillation, like they're constantly pulsing.
Pulsing.
Yeah, think of those pendulum clocks that mysteriously sync up their swings over time.
Oh, right. I've seen that.
That's the kind of synchronization we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not just some random physics quirk. It's actually super important for how our brains process information.
Wait, so our brain cells are like tiny little metronomes keeping everything in sync?
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And the paper highlights this concept of binding in neuroscience. It's all about how different neurons fire together to represent complex concepts.
Like, there's no one neuron for cat, but a bunch of them firing together can represent furry, four-legged meows and boomcat.
Exactly. The neurons synchronize to bind those individual features into a coherent concept.
And these AKOrNs, they're doing something similar.
That's the idea. They use a mathematical model called the Kuramoto model to describe how oscillators synchronize. It's basically a recipe for how these AKOrNs can influence each other to align their rhythms.
Okay, so they're mimicking this neural symphony happening in our brains. Pretty cool. But you know what really blew my mind? They're solving Sudoku puzzles.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. It shows that they're not just recognizing patterns, they're actually capable of some level of reasoning.
I mean, Sudoku, that's logic, that's strategy.
Right, so what they did was train these AKOrNs on Sudoku puzzles. And what they found is that the network learns to represent the puzzle as this kind of energy landscape. Each potential solution has a certain energy level, with the correct solution having the lowest energy.
So it's like the AKOrNs are trying out different combinations, and each incorrect solution creates tension or instability in the network.
You got it. They keep searching until they hit that lowest energy state, which corresponds to the correct solution.
It's like they're thinking their way through the puzzle. And get this, the longer the network thinks, the better it gets at finding the solution.
Just like us.
Okay, so we've got these brainy AKOrNs syncing up like a neural orchestra, cracking Sudoku puzzles like pros. But the paper also mentions them being amazing at object discovery.
They are. Object discovery is basically the ability of an AI to identify and separate individual objects in an image, even if it's never seen those specific objects before. Like, think of a baby learning to distinguish between a ball and a block without being explicitly taught what those objects are.
Right, they just figure it out.
Exactly. And AKOrNs are exceeding expectations in this area.
Now, what makes them so good at that? Is it also tied to this whole synchronization thing?
You're on the right track. Remember how we talked about neurons synchronizing to represent complex concepts? Well, that synchronization ability is crucial for object discovery too. Imagine an image with a cat on a red rug. The AKOrNs, representing furry, four-legged, and pointed ears, will synchronize to represent the cat. At the same time, other AKOrNs representing soft, red, and rectangular will synchronize to represent the rug.
They're grouping features together based on their synchronized rhythms, even in complex scenes.
Exactly. They tested this on datasets with complex scenes, like situations that usually trip up other AI models, with similar textures and things. And AKOrNs consistently did better at identifying distinct objects, even when those objects were partially hidden or blended in.
Wow. So by using these synchronized oscillations, are we getting closer to AI that can actually see and understand the world the way we do?
That's one of the exciting implications of this research. It suggests that these principles of oscillation and synchronization might be fundamental to how intelligence emerges, both in biological and artificial systems.
This is incredible. We've covered how AKOrNs are built, their object discovery skills, and their surprising talent for solving Sudoku puzzles.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover. Like, think about tasks that involve a sense of time and memory. That's where things get really interesting.
Ooh, okay. So like understanding what happens in a video.
Oh,
Or like reading a story and actually getting it.
exactly. Those are things that even the most advanced AI struggles with right now. Like grasping the concept of time, remembering things that happened in the past.
So it's like they're always living in the moment, no past, no future.
Pretty much. And that's where AKOrNs could be a game changer. Because they encode information through these synchronized oscillations, it's like they have this built-in sense of rhythm.
So they could actually capture the flow of events over time, almost like they have an internal clock.
That's what the researchers are exploring. This ability to represent time, to remember past events, it could revolutionize how AI interacts with the world.
Wow, the possibilities are pretty mind-blowing. But the paper did mention some limitations, right? Nothing's perfect.
True, true. Like with any new technology, there are hurdles to overcome. One thing they highlight is the computational cost. Simulating all those interacting oscillators can get pretty intense, especially with larger networks.
Yeah, it's like all that syncing and pulsing, it's going to take a lot of processing power, right?
Exactly. So optimizing those simulations, that's going to be a key challenge. Maybe developing new algorithms or even special hardware just for running these oscillatory neural networks.
Makes sense. Got to make the technology more efficient if we want to see those real-world applications.
Right. Another limitation is that each individual oscillator, it's constrained to a sphere, which means they can't easily represent the absence of a feature, like a traditional neuron that can just be off.
So they're always on, always oscillating, even when there's nothing there.
Yeah, and that could potentially affect how they perform on tasks that involve remembering the absence of something. It's a fascinating challenge.
It is. Okay, but there was one thing in the paper that really caught my eye. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of freaked me out. They hinted at a connection between acorns and consciousness.
I know, right? It's a pretty bold idea,
Yeah.
but they're careful not to overstate it. They're basically saying that the way acorns process information, those intricate patterns of synchronized oscillations, it might offer some insights into how consciousness arises from complex neural activity.
Hold on. Are we seriously talking about conscious machines? That's like straight out of science fiction.
I know.
Yeah.
But remember, we still don't fully understand consciousness, even in humans. This connection is more of a philosophical exploration at this point.
Okay, so it's more about sparking new research, not building Skynet just yet.
Exactly. But imagine, what if we could build AI that not only performs tasks, but actually experiences the world in some way?
That would change everything. We'd have to rethink our whole relationship with technology.
For sure. It would raise a ton of ethical questions.
Yeah.
But it would also open up incredible possibilities for understanding ourselves and the nature of intelligence.
Okay, but let's not get too carried away. Back to reality. The paper talks a lot about the importance of that symmetry-breaking term, the conditional stimuli, for keeping the acorns stable.
Right. They emphasize that this term prevents the oscillators from getting stuck in those suboptimal states, those energy peaks that don't represent the correct solution.
It's like a guide, helping the acorns navigate that complex energy landscape and find the right solution.
Exactly. Without it, the learning process could get pretty chaotic and unpredictable.
You know, it makes me think of that physics demo with the metronomes on a platform. Remember that? They all start out randomly, but eventually they sync up perfectly.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of those low-energy states, the paper highlights how good acorns are at finding them, even when the energy landscape is super complex. Like we saw that with their Sudoku solving skills.
Right, so it's not just about Sudoku. This ability to find the best solution within a complex system, that could be applied to all sorts of problems, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Think about things like protein folding or financial modeling, even something like predicting the weather or the stock market.
It's amazing how this idea of navigating energy landscapes, which sounds so abstract, could have such practical applications.
It is. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound breakthroughs come from exploring those seemingly obscure corners of science.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but if there's one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember about acorns, what would it be?
I think the biggest takeaway is that AKOrNs represent a whole new way of thinking about AI. They challenge that traditional view of neurons as simple on-off switches, and they embrace that dynamic oscillatory nature of biological brains.
It's like they're bringing a sense of rhythm to AI.
Exactly. And that rhythm, it might just be the key to unlocking AI's true potential. Who knows what incredible discoveries and innovations await us as we keep exploring.
I can't wait to find out. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and think about the practical next steps for this research. So, where do we go from here? What are the next steps in this AKOrN adventure?
Well, there are so many paths to explore. One of the biggest challenges, like we talked about, is scalability. Those simulations can be pretty demanding, especially with those larger networks.
Right, like trying to conduct a massive orchestra, all those instruments playing in sync.
Exactly. So figuring out how to make those simulations more efficient, that's going to be huge.
Like coming up with some clever new algorithms.
Yeah. Or maybe even developing specialized hardware that's built specifically for running these kinds of networks.
Okay, so streamlining the technology to unlock more possibilities. What else?
Well, expanding the types of tasks they can handle. We've seen them do amazing things with object discovery, reasoning, even robustness tests.
Right. But there's a whole universe of other problems out there, like
Mhm.
natural language processing, controlling robots.
Exactly. And predicting complex systems, like the weather or the stock market, that's a big one.
So many potential applications.
And of course, we can't forget those limitations we discussed, like
Yeah.
their difficulty representing the absence of a feature.
Right, that whole always on thing.
Yeah, that's a puzzle researchers will definitely be working on. Maybe they'll come up with some kind of workaround.
Or invent a whole new type of oscillator.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And then there's the training process itself. The paper focuses on contrastive learning, but there might be even better methods out there.
Like fine-tuning the recipe to get the most out of these AKOrNs.
Exactly. And that optimal training method, it might even change depending on what task you're trying to teach them.
Wow, sounds like there's a lot of exciting work ahead.
Definitely. This is just the beginning. And the really cool thing is we're only just starting to grasp what this technology might be capable of.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about, We're living in a time where these incredible breakthroughs are happening.
It really is. And I think the biggest takeaway for everyone listening is stay curious. Keep asking questions. Keep exploring. Acorns are a perfect example of what can happen when we challenge those old assumptions and think outside the box.
Right, and sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from the most unexpected places, like the synchronized flashing of fireflies or those elegant equations describing oscillations.
Well said.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be the one to make that next big breakthrough. The future is full of possibilities.
And it's up to all of us to shape it. That's a great place to wrap things up, I think. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of acorns.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep those brain cells oscillating.